Good morning and happy Friday. My name is Jay Rosenthal. I'm the co-founder of Cultivated Media, the host of this program, which every other day is called Cultivated Live, but on Fridays we call it Reporter's Notebook because we have an intrepid reporter from MJBizDaily with us every Friday. Today, Chris, you are on the hot seat. You are Chris Roberts. You are a longtime reporter in the industry. And just let's give a little background about Cultivated. Since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first, providing our viewers and readers with the most important, insightful, useful, and timely information every single day through our newsletter, which you can find at cultivated.news, through this daily live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube. So follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to us on YouTube, get our newsletter in your inbox every single morning. And on Friday mornings, we welcome in our friends at MJBizDaily. Chris, thanks for being here.
Jay, thank you for having me.
I wish we were talking about better things, but we're going to talk about a story you wrote this week about the fourth California cannabis testing lab that lost their license as sort of a concerted crackdown continues. Give us the highlights or the lowlights of this story, and then we'll sort of talk about what it might mean.
Yeah, sure. The basics are that in the past year, it seems like regulators have taken more seriously the questions around the veracity of what you read on the label of a regulated marijuana product. I mean, for many years, I think there have been warnings in the industry amongst operators and amongst some product makers as well that the THC potency number on the label couldn't be trusted. And we've heard lots about secret shopper tests that private labs have run, and they've said, look, like that cannabis is not as strong as advertised. There's stuff in that cannabis that shouldn't be there. And there have been a lot of warnings around the industry that this has been a widespread problem across the country. And in California, anyway, it seems like regulators are really starting to crack down. And yeah, as you pointed out, since last year, now at least four and counting as of now, labs have either had their annual license denied or revoked. And this most recent was a lab called Verity Analytics in San Diego County. But then also simultaneously, we should point this out, California began the year with 37 licensed testing labs. They're now down to 27, which would also suggest that there might be some labs that have chosen to quietly go out of business rather than comply with some new strict standards. These include that went into effect at the beginning of the year. There's a new method for determining THC, and we began the year with not every lab having verified its method. So there were some testing labs that began the year not even allowed to test flower. But then throughout the year, we've seen the Department of Cannabis Control in California, take some stronger action. I mean, but some of the stuff that they've identified is kind of bad. There's
THC inflation, and then there's other stuff.
There's some nasty stuff. Yeah, there's some nasty pesticides that shouldn't be there. In one instance, the state. So what the state has done is they've started doing testing with what's called a reference lab. So they have their own lab as well as a university lab that they've been contracting with, that's actually going out and getting product off the shelf and testing it themselves to see if, in fact, it is as strong as advertised and it is as clean as advertised. And in some instances, the answer to both is no. In one instance, the cannabis that the lab tested, that the private lab tested, was at 24%. The state said actually it's 16. So, 50% stronger than it actually is. And then in another instance, there's a banned pesticide that the lab did not detect at all, that the state found was at twice the allowable limit. And that triggered a product recall. But that also begs a question, and we still don't know the answers to these things. How much of that stuff went out there? How much of it was sold? And what is the public health impact of all this going to be? We just don't know yet.
Yeah. And it strikes me, sort of to zoom out a bit, is that one of the promises of legalization is that product is lab tested, third-party lab tested. What you get on the shelf is what it says on the container. And I'm going to take two tacks on this. One is, this is the system working, I guess a bit delayed, like the lab is now caught. This has been sort of addressed or in the process of being addressed in California. The other is like, this goes at the heart of sort of the argument for legalization, which is this shouldn't happen. But is this sort of, could it be both? Is that this is an industry growing up and this is how industries grow up?
Yeah, I think that this was something that was not necessarily thought of when legalization was beginning. I think at that point, we're talking about it as, oh, people shouldn't go to jail for this. There should be, but then the next step is obviously you need access to safe and regulated product. That was obviously one of the big value adds was, oh, well, you don't know what the local neighborhood dealer is putting in there. The local neighborhood dealer isn't age gating, things like this. And yeah, I mean, what the last couple of years have demonstrated is that, I mean, the market, in a way, you can say, is acting rationally. The critique that you heard from labs who say that they were losing business to unscrupulous labs is that, if you're a product, and at every step of the supply chain, there is reinforcement for this kind of conduct, right? Like if you go into a dispensary, they'll tell you people walk in here and they want the strongest weed. So it's the strongest weed that's going to sell. So if you sell the strongest weed, you're going to do well in what's, as we all know, is a competitive market with high taxes and low margins. And so if you're a product manufacturer and you want to stay in business, you do have incentive on some level to go out and find a lab that's going to give you the highest percentage, the highest THC percentage possible. So yeah, I mean, it is this vicious cycle that's got to be broken somewhere. And yeah, that is the job of a regulator. And yeah, to your point, I think this is a sign of the system working if it didn't work quite as quickly as some people might have liked. I mean, some of the labs that we talked to for the story have been blowing the whistle on this for literally years before it seems like the state stepped in and did something.
Yeah. And your point, that's sort of when a market is set up, and in California's case, because voters voted on it, regulators are sort of trying to play catch up about how to address the market to be responsive to voters. Like I really hate quoting Donald Rumsfeld, but like this is one of the unknown unknowns, right? It's like, you don't know what you don't know going into a market, and 5-6 years hence, you're continuing to learn.
You go to market with the weed you have, so yeah.
Well played.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, let's say, we could
quoting Donald Rumsfeld to each other.
A lot of time. Yeah, maybe we're sort of dating ourselves here too, I guess. But
anyway,
exactly that there are, and I think that again, sort of taking like you're looking at what markets do. I mean, markets, unfortunately, there's going to be motive, there's going to be incentive to exploit a loophole, to do whatever you can to make your product shine in the market. So yeah, again, this is maybe just sort of like, this is how markets work, but also markets need regulators. If we accept the premise that we want like a regulated market, then yeah, I mean, this is just exactly when a regulator is supposed to step in and do its job. And to California's credit, it does seem like that's finally happening. But I think that also should make other states around the country examine what they're doing. And it should also make, I think, educated consumers request this type of scrutiny. Not every state in the U.S. has this reference lab, like has this system where either the state or even third parties are going and verifying that these results are accurate. California has this now. Oregon, I think, is getting started. Maryland's getting started. But where I live in New York, we haven't reached that stage yet, I think in large part because we're just at an earlier point where we're worried about trying to get retail capacity out there. Like we want to make sure that there are legal stores, period. And not the thousands of illicit weed bodegas and things like this. So yeah, and I think that should be something that will be coming soon, but I don't think it's too early for anyone interested in a sustainable market to start asking these questions.
Yeah, it's like if California took 4 or 5 years, every subsequent state should take less, right? Because it's something that's already been identified.
Or 6 years, really. I mean, yeah, like California legalized in November 2016, and then the first legal sale was 2018. So yeah, I mean, it shouldn't take half a decade. Yeah, and again, I mean, the whole concept of a laboratory of democracy and just seeing how this thing works. Maybe these weren't issues that California anticipated. Obviously, these are ones that newer markets shouldn't anticipate. They should know that this is going to be an issue.
Right. And we've seen it, I think, in every market, certainly on, if not on the pesticide side of things, then on the THC inflation. Whereas, I think it's an unwritten thought in the marketplace that there are labs that test you higher than others. There are ways to pull samples from your flower, certainly, that will test better. There's a way to test so it tests better. All those things, which I think is the market working itself out.
Yeah.
And certainly there is and this week we had on someone here in Canada talking about standardization for sort of how these things get done, and the importance of standards being the go-between between what the regulations say and what is practice are standards, and sort of how you get to the specific standards for testing cannabis flower, raw flower, versus what's going in a pre-roll versus what's going in, all those things do take time to work themselves out, I think.
Well, exactly. That you have to, well, at least in the United States, of course, the idea of who is going to create these standards, who's going to implement them, and then who's going to enforce them. These are all sort of different questions. I think that it's a little easy to blame federal prohibition. I mean, obviously, we have a regulated market in the face of federal prohibition anyway. But yeah, I mean, these aren't necessarily things that states are used to doing. It's the feds that do a lot of agricultural inspection. It's the feds that that regulate. It's the Food and Drug Administration. That's a federal agency that regulates pharmaceutical drugs. I mean, obviously, the whole question of what category cannabis belongs in is an entirely different discussion that is also very passionate, and there's a lot of strong opinions. But yeah, I mean, you can make an argument that this just isn't something that states have a lot of experience with. But yeah, I mean, they do now. They have more. And also, I think, not that I think the onus falls on consumers, but I do think that consumers need to be a little bit educated and just know that when they pick up a jar of cannabis flower, if it says 40%, I mean, you can look at it. You can look at a thing and be like, okay, is there not that much carbon? There's not that much water. There's not that much other stuff in there. I just think at some point, a consumer also does have to be educated and just tell him or herself, or tell themselves that, okay, that label is a little bit weird. What else should I be trusting stuff coming out of this company? And yeah, I mean, but ultimately, yeah, I think the best way to spin this story, I'm hoping anyway, is that, yeah, here is an example of a regulator catching up to what the market's doing and taking some proactive action, even if it's not as soon as some might have hoped.
Yeah. I think that's fair. And it also seems to be happening on a parallel track with California in particular taking more action, frankly, to support an industry, right? I mean, support the legal cannabis industry that is set up to be cannabis and then cannabis dispensaries, because there's also on a parallel track this week a crackdown on hemp-derived THC products in California being straight up banned. So there's a lot happening in California.
There's a lot happening in California. I mean, as probably there should be, given how large the state is, given how established the cannabis industry is there. It's the oldest medical market in the world, I suppose. Having legalized medical cannabis in 1996. It's got arguably one of the best established, traditional markets, and so all these things. Yeah, and it's a massive place that the city, state, all these things. And yeah, I mean, when and if there's obviously interstate commerce, exactly where most of the hemp is going to be sourced in the country, I mean, remains to be seen. Will it be states like Oklahoma where, the land and labor are generally cheaper? Will it be, will there be the tobacco producing states like Kentucky and North Carolina that have taken a shine to this? We just don't know yet. When is interstate commerce going to happen for cannabis? We just don't know yet. But yeah, I mean, to your point, yes, the governor in California, Gavin Newsom, seems like this was personal for him, these hemp regulations. There was a liquor store in Corte Madera in Marin County. It's not too far away from where he has a high school age daughter now, not too far away from where she goes to school. And there was a liquor store there selling, hemp-derived gummies next to the normal candies, hemp-derived drinks. That the sellers of these products claim pretty vociferously that they are obeying rules like age gating, like you're not selling it to kids. Look, I mean, alcohol merchants selling to kids has been a problem since prohibition ended. We know it happens. How widespread, we don't really know. But yeah, I think that as well, though. I mean, obviously, the regulated cannabis industry in California knows, just as every other cannabis industry in the country knows, that hemp is playing by different rules. And I think that, yeah, if you're a maker of cannabis products and you look at what you're paying in taxes and you look at the restrictions that are imposed upon you that aren't imposed upon hemp, and you definitely know that the playing field isn't even. Now, whether what California is doing, just saying, no, take these products off the shelves, whether that's the right approach remains to be seen. I mean, this is stuff that you can buy via the mails.
Right.
You can buy THCA flower via the mails, which is another separate issue. And so, yeah, I mean, enforcing this is going to be an entirely different pickle to see if, some of the onus on enforcement here is being passed on to local law enforcement, whether they're going to have the interest in doing this. Yeah, remains to be seen. But yeah, I think that what's playing out there is absolutely what's playing out all across the country. Just this growing awareness that the Farm Bill created this enormous, unexpected market in intoxicating hemp products. And yeah, like some states where there's a cannabis industry that has some political clout, yeah, action is definitely being taken.
Yeah, on all these fronts. And it's good that we have you to check in with these things on every Friday, because you and your colleagues, because it does move fast. Well, when it happens very fast. It seems like, even if it takes 5 years to get going. But I think, as we talked about before, what happens in California often happens faster in other places, where as people try to catch up. And it really is the bellwether of the cannabis industry. And these issues, both lab testing and hemp-derived products, are on the forefront of what is happening in the industry. So, Chris, I appreciate your time today as we head off into the weekend.
Jay, thanks as always for having me.
You got it. That has been Reporter's Notebook for this Friday. We'll be back Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern right here on this stream called Cultivated Live. Make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at cultivated.news. Chris, have a good weekend. Everybody else, take care of yourselves. Have a good one.
See you guys.